Benjamin Franklin invented the lightning rod. He helped birth a nation. He was the most famous man in America, celebrated in Paris, admired across Europe, sought after by kings and presidents. But when he died at 84 years old, this genius was already being forgotten. The man who shaped democracy was buried without the honor he deserved. His inventions were stolen by others. His name was quietly removed from the institutions he founded. And today, most Americans couldn't tell you a single true thing Benjamin Franklin actually did. We remember his face on the $100 bill. We know he was a founding father. But the real Benjamin Franklin, the scientist, the dreamer, the man who sacrificed everything for a country that would abandon him, he's become a ghost in his own history. How did the architect of American independence become invisible? How did a mind this brilliant end up so utterly alone? Today, we tell the story of a man torn between two worlds, the nation he created and the legacy he was denied. Benjamin Franklin was born in Boston, Massachusetts, on January 6, 1706. His father, Josiah Franklin, was a tallow chandler, a man who made candles and soap. The family was not wealthy. They were ordinary, and Josiah had 17 children. Benjamin was the 15th. In a crowded house where every mouth needed feeding, a child like Benjamin barely registered. His father wanted him to become a minister. That was the plan. Education, respectability, a path out of poverty. But young Benjamin had other ideas. He could read before most children could walk. By age 7, he was devouring books like they were air itself. His father saw this hunger and misunderstood it. He thought education was a waste on a boy destined for manual labor. So at age 10, Josiah pulled Benjamin from school. The boy was sent to work in his father's candle shop, boiling tallow, pouring wax, surrounded by smoke and heat. It was back-breaking work for a child. It was also a prison. For 5 years, Benjamin worked in that shop, watching the world through the window, dreaming of escape. At 15, his life changed. His older brother James had learned printing in London. He returned to Boston and opened a printing shop. James needed an apprentice. Benjamin begged to join him. Finally, he was out of the candle shop. He was surrounded by words on paper, ideas being printed and circulated. For the first time in his life, Benjamin felt like he could breathe. But James Franklin was cruel. He beat the boy regularly. He worked him 16-hour days. He paid him nothing but room and board. By 17, Benjamin could no longer endure it. He made a decision that would change everything. He would run away. In October 1723, with barely any money in his pocket, Benjamin Franklin left Boston with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mind burning with ambition. He would never see his father again. He would never speak to his brother again. He was alone in the world. The family was not wealthy, barely registered, establishes isolation. In the autumn of 1723, he had almost nothing. He was a stranger in a strange city. He had a few shillings in his pocket and a skill, printing, that he had learned under his brutal brother's thumb. He walked through the streets of Philadelphia with no plan, no connections, and no safety net. He was utterly vulnerable. He found work almost immediately at a printing shop owned by Samuel Keimer. The work was hard, but it was honest work. He lived frugally, saving every penny, sleeping in a small attic room, eating as little as possible. Other young men his age were carousing in taverns, spending money on women and drink. Extraordinary people suffer while they build. They delay gratification. They endure loneliness. Within a year, Franklin had saved enough money to travel to London and deepen his printing skills. He worked in the great print shops of London, absorbing knowledge, training his mind. When he returned to Philadelphia at age 20, He had a plan. He would become a master printer. He would start his own business. He would become wealthy. By age 24, Franklin had established his own printing shop. By age 26, he had purchased the Pennsylvania Gazette, a struggling newspaper that had been failing. Within months, he had transformed it into the most important newspaper in the American colonies. He filled his pages with practical advice: how to preserve food, how to build a better home, how to improve your life. He told stories that made ordinary people feel seen. But the competition was fierce. Other printers wanted what he had. Merchants wanted to control the printing presses. Political figures wanted to manipulate the news. Franklin was surrounded by enemies who envied his success. They tried to undermine him. They tried to steal his customers. They tried to discredit him. But Franklin had learned something in his escape from Boston. He had learned to survive. He was relentless. He was clever. He outmaneuvered every rival. By age 30, Benjamin Franklin was the most successful printer in Pennsylvania. He was respected. He was wealthy. He was invited to the finest dinners. Important men sought his counsel. He had moved from poverty and brutality to success and recognition. He had accomplished in 13 years what most men never achieve in a lifetime. But here is what nobody tells you about ambition. The higher you climb, the more desperate people become to knock you down. In 1746, Benjamin Franklin conducted an experiment that would change science forever. He flew a kite in a thunderstorm. Most people thought he was mad. The entire scientific establishment said it was impossible. Lightning was a divine force, untouchable by human hands. But Franklin asked a simple question: what if lightning is just electricity? He built a kite. He attached a metal key to the string. He flew it during a storm, and he held the string, feeling the electricity coursing through it. The metal key began to spark. His hypothesis was correct. Lightning was electricity. This single moment, this one act of courage and brilliance, changed how humanity understood the world. From that moment forward, Franklin's name was known not just in America, but across Europe and the entire scientific community. He was no longer just a printer. He was a scientist. But Franklin's greatest achievement was not scientific. It was political. By the 1750s, Franklin had become deeply involved in Pennsylvania politics. He was a member of the provincial assembly. He was a delegate to important colonial conventions. And as the colonies began to sense that independence from Britain might be possible, Benjamin Franklin became one of the most important men in America. He was part of the group that drafted the Declaration of Independence. He was part of the Continental Congress. He was sent to France as a diplomat, where his charm, his wit, and his scientific reputation made him a beloved figure in French society. While other Americans were struggling to gain European support for their revolution, Franklin was dining with the French aristocracy, persuading them to fund the American cause with money and ships and soldiers. Without Benjamin Franklin's diplomatic skill, France might never have joined the American Revolution. Without French support, America might never have won independence. Think about that. The nation you live in today might not exist without the words spoken and the relationships built by this one man in the salons of Paris. Franklin helped write the Constitution. He was there at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, at 81 years old, still contributing, still thinking, still shaping the future. The other delegates respected him. They called him the sage of the convention. He was a founding father, in the truest sense, not just someone who was present, but someone whose ideas shaped the very structure of the nation. He had achieved everything. He had wealth. He had fame. He had the respect of the greatest minds of his generation. He had shaped a nation. He had done what almost no human being ever does. Franklin had sacrificed a normal life. He had been married to his wife Deborah. He lived in France while she stayed in Philadelphia. He had a son, William, but his relationship with William was fractured by politics and by something else, something darker. Franklin had also fathered a child out of wedlock years before, a son named William, who would eventually oppose the revolution itself. The political conflict between father and son became a wound that never healed. And in pursuing greatness, Franklin had made enemies, powerful enemies, other founding fathers who felt overshadowed by his brilliance, politicians who resented his influence, younger men who wanted the spotlight for themselves. What if lightning is just electricity, the moment of scientific breakthrough? Without Franklin, America might not exist. The stakes of his achievement. He had sacrificed a normal life. The cost begins to show. He had made powerful enemies, foreshadow the betrayal. Benjamin Franklin retired from public life in 1785. He was 79 years old. The Constitution had been signed. America was born. And Franklin expected that his life's work would be honored. He expected that history would remember him. He was wrong. When he returned to Philadelphia after his years in France, something had changed. A new generation of politicians had risen. Younger men, like Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, were now at the center of power. They acknowledged Franklin's contributions, but they didn't defer to him anymore. He was old, he was tired, his health was failing, and in the ruthless world of politics, there is no place for the old. You are useful until you are not, then you are discarded. George Washington became the first president of the United States. Franklin had helped make this nation possible. But Washington was getting the glory. Washington was in every newspaper. Washington's name was on every lip. Franklin was fading. His role in the founding was being minimized. History was being rewritten, even as he watched it happen. Franklin's last years were marked by illness and loneliness. His wife Deborah had died decades earlier. His son William had never reconciled with him. They had taken opposite sides in the Revolution, and that wound was permanent. His other children had their own lives. Franklin lived in his house in Philadelphia, increasingly isolated, increasingly aware that the world was moving on without him. On April 17, 1790, Benjamin Franklin died at the age of 84. The nation mourned. There were eulogies. Newspapers praised him. Congress went into mourning. But within weeks, the attention faded. Other news filled the papers. Other men filled the spotlight. Franklin's funeral was respectful, but it was not the grand affair befitting a founding father. It was not the honor he deserved. In the decades that followed, something remarkable happened. Benjamin Franklin was erased from history. Textbooks mentioned him, but they didn't emphasize him. Schools taught children about Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Hamilton, but Franklin, he was a printer who became a scientist who helped with the founding. That was all. The depth of his genius was forgotten. The scope of his contribution was minimized. The man who had changed the world was reduced to a face on a $100 bill, a symbol, not a person. For nearly 2 centuries, Benjamin Franklin was invisible in his own history. And perhaps that is the cruelest irony of all. The man who spent his entire life seeking recognition died only to be forgotten by the very nation he had created. In the ruthless world of politics, there is no place for the old. The bitter truth. Franklin was fading. The moment when he realizes he's being erased. Franklin was reduced to a footnote, the tragedy of erasure. The man who created the nation was forgotten by the nation. In recent decades, historians have begun the long work of reclaiming Benjamin Franklin. Scholars have studied his papers. They have read his private letters. They have examined his scientific notebooks. And they have realized We were wrong. We forgot one of the greatest minds in human history. Franklin was not just a printer or a politician or a scientist. He was all of these things simultaneously. He was a polymath, a Renaissance man living in the 18th century. He invented the lightning rod that protected buildings from fire. He invented bifocal glasses so that aging eyes could still see clearly. He designed a more efficient stove. He conducted experiments in electricity that laid the groundwork for modern electrical science. But his greatest achievement was not an invention or a scientific discovery. It was this: he showed that an ordinary person, a poor boy from Boston, with no connections, no wealth, no family legacy, could transform himself through relentless effort, integrity, and intelligence into someone who shaped nations. What does Benjamin Franklin teach us? He teaches us that greatness is temporary, but character is eternal. He teaches us that we must never confuse fame with significance. He teaches us that the most important work we do might not be recognized in our lifetime, but that does not make it any less important. He teaches us to build something larger than ourselves, something that outlasts us, something that serves others, something that makes the future better than the present. Benjamin Franklin died having his contributions forgotten, but his ideas, the ideas he planted in the Constitution, the scientific truths he discovered, the character he modeled, those live on. They are woven into the fabric of the nation. And that, finally, is the real legacy, enduring impact on humanity itself. The story of Benjamin Franklin is the story of someone whose life was erased from the history books and then reclaimed by those who dared to look closer. How many other stories are we missing? How many other remarkable people have been forgotten by time? If you enjoyed learning about Benjamin Franklin today, please subscribe to Epic History Vault. We're uncovering the stories of history's greatest minds, the people who changed the world, and the people who changed history. If Franklin's story resonated with you, subscribe to Epic History Vault. We uncover the brilliant minds history tried to bury. Leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on Benjamin Franklin's story? What surprised you most? Leave a like if Franklin's story resonated with you, and share this with someone who needs to remember that great work is rarely recognized in the moment, but it echoes through eternity. Thank you for watching.